The next sample we're going to do is the 4-point dart, or the contour dart, also known as the fisheye dart. There's many names for this dart. We're using the contour dart pattern. That's how I've labeled it. Contour darts are used in certain areas. You'll see this in the waistline of certain garments to add a little bit of cinching at the waist for certain garments. You'll notice that the contour dart is essentially 2 3-point darts butted up against each other. So the construction and the pinning for them is essentially the same. Make sure you have marked your tailor's tacks either with thread or with a friction pen. I haven't marked mine at all, so I should probably do that. I'm just going to do some quick tailor's tacks. You can use chalk, transfer paper. I'm going to do quick little tailor's tacks. In and out, 1 stitch. Just be careful when you're using these kind of tailor's tacks. They will easily slip out if you're not very careful when removing your pattern, but they're much faster. Okay, carefully remove my pattern, making sure to hold down my tailor's tacks as I'm lifting that paper off so I don't lose these marks. Cool. And I'll use these points to help me mark out where this 4-point dart should go. Again, you can use a variety of marking methods: friction pen, transfer paper, chalk, tailor's tacks. Tailor's tacks are the best method because then you avoid, and wipe away chalk. Those are the OG methods for marking your fabric. Then you don't have to worry about marks that might be left on your garments. Remove my tailor's tacks because now I've got this 4-point dart copied. And I'm going to fold my fabric lengthwise, so along this dashed line that's on the pattern. Fold my fabric along the lengthwise of that 4-point dart. Fold my fabric down there. I'm going to place a pin right at this point and another pin right at this point. And now I want to, again, as we did with a 3-point dart, we have to use pins to make sure that these legs of the dart match up to these legs on the opposite side, because we can't see through our fabric. So I'm going to take a pin, I'm going to poke it through this point on my dart, see where it comes out on the other side. Looks like I'm pretty much on the money right there. Again, if it is off by any discernible amount, you'll have to roll your fabric. I'm kind of being extra, I'm exaggerating the rolling here, but roll your fabric in between your fingers until those 2 points match up. And I'm going to pin that in place. And yet again, I will use my pins along the dart leg, pin in and out along one dart leg, and see how it matches up to the opposite side. It's a little bit off down here, so I'm going to roll my fabric a little bit, repin it. Nope, still off. Gotta roll it back the other way. Nope. Better. So that's sitting a little bit better. Once that's in place, I'm going to pin across my stitching line so I don't have a pin in my way while I'm trying to sew. Now, as you know, I like to sew with all my excess fabric to the left, so I will be sewing along this dart leg. Remember, we start at the widest part of the dart, just like we did with our 3-point darts. Start at the widest point and then stitch to the dart. Start at the widest point of your dart, then stitch down to the dart point, and then stitch off, leaving tail, so we can tie knots in that. So I'll be sewing from this side, so I like to have my pins accessible to easily pull them out. When I go to this side, however, I don't want to have to turn my work around because then I got all this extra fabric over here, so I just turn my work over and I usually stitch my opposite dart leg down here. Just in case you're wondering why I'm pinning on the opposite side of my sample, it's just force of habit and it's what's comfortable for me while I'm on my machine. It's a little bit off there. It's better. Close enough. Okay. There we go. So now I'm prepared so I can easily remove my pins from this side and from this side. I can easily remove my pins. Let's head to the machine and we'll sew this dart together. So starting here at the widest point of my dart, I'm actually going to place my needle a little bit behind this point, somewhere back here, and I'm going to stitch down, stitch into this point, pivot, and then come down my dart leg. So I'm going to place my needle a little bit behind that point, about 1/4 inch or so behind that point. So there's the actual point on my dart. So I'm going to stitch to that point, kind of pivot my way around. It's not a very dramatic pivot. Stitching on a number 2, no back tacking. There we go. I can pivot and then I'll stitch down the rest of this leg. Stitch to that dart point and then pull my work out, leaving long tail so I can put some square knots in there. Just going to trim my extra threads here from the beginning of my stitching. Okay, I'm going to turn my work around. Whoops. So there we've got that first line of stitching. I'm going to turn my work around. And just as I did before, I'm going to place my needle a few stitches back. I'm going to place my needle back here, and I'm going to overlap the stitches that are already sitting here. So I'm going to go back over to here, place my needle down, overlap my stitches. This will reinforce them. No need to have to back tack. We're just overlapping the stitches. I'm going to walk my stitches just so I know I'm stitching right on top of those previous stitches. Get to that point, pivot, and then I can sew off. Remove my work, leaving long tails. And I'll clip these threads here from where I started. Now I'm going to head to the iron to press. Because I'll be working with some fabric that now has a little bit of shape but a little bit contour to it, I'll be using my tailor's hand to press this. But what you might notice when you go to press it, there might be a little bit of resistance from your fabric. Often when we're working with these contoured darts, there will be a little bit of tension that will happen in the fabric. And what you'll need to do is right here at the widest point of the dart, you'll need to grab a pair of scissors, small scissors or snips, and clip through the fabric to that point. You want to stay about 1/8 of an inch, about 1/16 of an inch, a scant 1/8 of an inch away from that point. Do not stitch, do not clip through your stitching. Do not clip through your stitching. We just went through all that trouble to make 2 lines of stitching and overlapping our stitches and whatnot. Do not clip through your stitching. You're only clipping through the fabric. Stay at least 1/16 of an inch away from your stitching. There we go. At least 1/16 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch away from your stitching. Here's where my stitching is, over here at my stitching line. No, Oh, don't focus there. Focus over here. There we go. So here's my stitching over here where my friction pen mark is, and that's where my clipping has stopped, about a 1/16 of an inch away. Not so much that it's going to tear a hole through my stitching, but enough that it can relieve some of this tension. So I will go to my tailor's ham. Again, I'm going to press from the wrong side, and I'm going to press each half, similar to how you would press your 3-point dart. There's no semblance, there's no indication on our sample pattern where the center of the body is, center front or center back. So press to whichever side you like and keep it consistent. Don't press one side in one direction and the other in the other direction. Don't do that. Press them all in one direction, whichever side you prefer. In practice, when you're pressing these darts, we don't want extra fabric folding over off the edge. Our dart should stop, where we press our dart should stop where our dart point is. So practice the dart pressing. I shouldn't see any extra fabric folded and pressed all the way down to here, going past the dart point. Once we get past the dart point, your fabric should lay flat. There shouldn't be anything pressed over anything else when we go past the dart points. So practice pulling your fabric taut over your tailor's ham or your ironing board and pressing it nice and flat so that our dart points are where they should be. Okay, back to the work table to finish this up. Last thing to do is to tie little knots. We're not sewing anymore on this. Separate the tails of thread on either dart point and create a few square knots. About 2 or 3 square knots. Clip this, leaving some small tails. Do the same on the opposite side. 2 or 3 square knots is fine. Leave some little tails. And that is our sample. I forgot to label my other sample. So this is our contour 4-point or fisheye dart. Don't ask me why it's called a fisheye dart. It looks nothing like a fish's eye, but there we go. There's going to be some movement in here because remember, it's creating curvature to go around the body. This is where it would curve in towards the waist of the body and back out. It would curve in towards the waist here and then back out at the hip on a dress or jacket or coat. And that is it for our contour dart sample.